Alrighty, so here we have the scroll saw and a few parts on the scroll saw. Right here is your on-off switch. When you flip the switch on, the arm will start to go up and down, which will cause the blade to move. Right here is how you release the blade from the top section, and that's how you can thread your blade through material. Once again, you see there's a red zone. This red zone, your fingers cannot be in the red zone. That means you are way, way too close. Here's the table. You always want to make sure your material is flat on the table when using the scroll saw. And then at the scroll saw, because it's kind of rounded, it can be kind of confusing. You want to make sure you're always standing in front of the scroll saw. So about feet width apart, and your shoulders are straight with the bandsaw. Sometimes when you're running like a curve on the scroll saw. Sometimes when you're cutting a curve on the scroll saw, you may catch yourself starting to work around the scroll saw. And if that happens, you just need to make sure you stop, hold on to your material, and get yourself back in front of the blade. You may also catch yourself taking your hands and getting them around the saw. So if you catch yourself with both your hands back here, reset. So what I mean is hold on to your material, get back to where you're comfortable, and then continue on. So some of your specific safety rules on the scroll saw. So you want to check the blade is installed correctly before turning the machine on. So what that means is you want to make sure this blade is attached up in the top of the arm before you turn it on. If your blade isn't attached, the arm will just start going up and down, but your blade won't be moving. And I can help you with that process of attaching it later on. You want to make sure the table is clear of scraps and debris before using the machine. So you'll see right now there's nothing on the table. If Jessica used the scroll saw before you and there's a bunch of scraps back here, let Jessica know, hey, I cleaned up your scraps, but I just want to let you know you forgot to clean up your debris. Okay, you don't want to start with anything on your table because that could cause you to get distracted, for it to get in your way, especially if you're working with a larger piece of material. So make sure your table is clear of scraps and debris before starting. Keep 2 inches between the blade and your hands. So this rule sounds familiar because it's the exact same amount at the bandsaw. So that red zone means you are way too close, but you want to keep 2 inches between your blade and your hands at the scroll saw as well for that safety concern. You want to make relief cuts to avoid having to cut sharp corners or make tight turns. Complex curves should be broken into several cuts or several simple curves. So what this means is, just like at the bandsaw, if we were to have a curve, we want to make sure that we're using relief cuts first. Same thing can be done on the scroll saw as the bandsaw. You're going to cut those straight cuts first, back out of them very carefully, and then you're going to start going around the curve. For really tight curves, let's say you have something kind of like this. You're going to want to cut these in multiple cuts, multiple smaller curves. So maybe first you cut a relief cut here, straight down the middle, and you cut out this piece of scrap. Then maybe you work on cutting out this piece of scrap. You're going to cut it down into smaller sections, because if we were to try to do this whole thing in one cut, more than likely you're going to get off your line and then mess up your cut. Also, it's a lot easier on the blade to cut it into multiple sections. Your blade's not being twisted. If you go to twist the blade on the scroll saw, the machine is going to react and is going to want to take control of your piece of material. Therefore, if you're twisting the scroll saw blade, your material is going to start to chatter. And that lets you know that you're twisting the blade. So then you just need to straighten it back out, let it catch up for a minute, and then carry on. The next one is to, just before the end of the cut, let up on the pressure you're applying so that your hand does not surge forward, and also so the blade can catch up. So the scroll saw is made to do very tight curves, weird cuts. So this blade is pretty flexible. And before you're just getting to the edge of a piece, you want to slow down because your blade is actually like this. So as you're pushing a piece of material through it, the blade is actually being bent, and I'm exaggerating this to give you a visual. So when you get to the edge, you want to slow down so that blade can catch up and then finish off. If you don't slow down, you're going to see the top and the bottom part of the blade come out, and then all of a sudden the middle piece is going to snap out. So slow down when you're getting to the edge of a cut. Next, hold material firmly to the table. So like I said before, if the scroll saw is being twisted, it's going to want to take your piece and chatter it on the table. Just make sure you have a good hold on your material. You never want to let your material go, so always make sure you at least have one hand on the material. If you have to readjust hands, pick one hand up, set it down, pick the other one, readjust. But just make sure we don't ever take both hands off, because then the machine has control of your material and not you. And then lastly, never place hands or fingers on the cut line. So this is the exact same rule as the bandsaw. We never want to place our hands or fingers on the line that we are cutting, because that's the path that we're going to be cutting. If our hand or finger is on it, we're more likely to cut our hand or finger than if they're completely off of the cut line and there's no hand or finger in sight of where we're cutting. If you have questions on the scroll saw, be sure to let me know.